Pleiadian Starship Pi Disclosure World Cruise, Operation Pi, in the sky. Commander, Pleiadian Starship Pi. UFO Mothership 333. Following on from the last article giving some of the history and details of our Pleiadian Explorer science all-purpose Starship Pi, I would like to proceed to giving some information about our forthcoming missions on this beautiful planet of ours, sweet Gaia. This sentient starship, all 1.1 kilometers (0.68 miles) of her, is presently based on our mothership Neptune, the flagship of the Pleiadian Starfleet currently stationed in our solar system for the Ascension process. It is my understanding that the Pi has been docked on the Neptune during the period since I left her to take on this 3D human incarnation. She has during this time been undergoing a refit in preparation for her role in her Disclosure World Cruise, or Operation Pi in the sky, as I have named it. The mothership Neptune is quite a large vessel by our terrestrial standards, but relatively small compared to some motherships which may be several thousand kilometers in size. Allow me to digress for a moment in order to relate an amusing incident from last year in connection with the size of the Neptune. Neptune is commanded by Ashira, who is my galactic cousin and is the son of Grenner, the former commander of Neptune and currently the president of the Intergalactic Council. Ashira's twin flame is Linda Dillon, our Channel 4 Golden Age of Gaia, so we are all family. Earlier last year during a Skype chat with Linda, I asked her if she had any idea of the size of the Neptune. Her answer was, I believe the Neptune is about 8 miles long and about 3 miles wide but deep, many layers. Linda spends many of her nights aboard the Neptune, just as I do on the Pi, but unlike me, she remembers her visits. This extract from the Heavenly Blessings episode with Commander Ashira dated March 18, 2014, is Linda's own account of what followed. I have a funny story that I was thinking of this morning. We have a dear friend who helps us with our transcripts. I guess we were talking a couple of weeks ago about the Neptune and he asked me about the size. I said, oh, I think it's about 8 miles long. And so the other night I'm home, and Ashira says to me on deck, so, what did you do with the other 20? And I said, what? And he said, yeah, you know, the other 20 miles of the ship. And so I was corrected. We're talking about 28 miles long, but you see a lot of that outer perimeter is like a spaceport where ships are stored and where things are happening. There's gardens and stuff and storage, and I don't tend to think of that necessarily as part of the ship. But I needed to share that with our friends because, you know, you talked to me about size and how wide, how long. I obviously really miscalculated in that case. I thought we'd get a kick out of that. But that's the kind of dry humor, you know, everybody got a chuckle out of it. But their humor is never cutting, it's never demeaning, there is such a level of respect and an honoring of, not only individual, but individual differences as well, it's a delight to be there. And I know that many of you are already there, you just don't remember it, because if you did you might be tempted not to come home. 1. So, since Neptune is about 28 miles in length 45 kilometers, I reckon she would be able to accommodate perhaps 10 to 12 starships like our Pi and docking bays down each side. An all-purpose starship such as our Pi can be adapted for specific missions as necessary. For example, during the Syrian migrations in which my Sacred Union partner and I took part, we brought, amongst other species, whales and dolphins to Gaia. Clearly, her cargo holds would have to have been adapted as large tanks to hold seawater to accommodate these cetaceans for the journey from the Sirius star system to Gaia. One visual download that I have had in connection with the forthcoming Disclosure World Cruise of Starship Pi is that she has been fitted with a magnificent concert hall located at the stern of the ship. I can visually see this concert hall as if I was in it yesterday, which I may well have been, since I am up on the Neptune and my Pi most nights during my sleeping hours. During my session with him on February 27, 2015, Archangel Michael said this, and you know, dear heart, you go to the Neptune, and certainly on the Pi, oh, many nights. But more on the relevance of this concert hall later. In this life, as in so many of my previous incarnations both on and off planet, I have been a healer, a physician this time, though I retired from this profession in 2010. Much of my time has been spent at sea, initially in the British Navy and subsequently as a ship's doctor with the Cunard Passenger Shipping Line. QE2 Cunard Line RMS QE2 For 8 years from 1990 to 1997 I was Principal Medical Officer aboard the Cunard Line's then flagship, the QE2, though this vessel was retired in November 2008 and has remained laid up in Dubai after plans to convert her to a floating hotel were shelved. It was no coincidence that I spent much of my professional life at sea. It was in many ways a preparation for the forthcoming Disclosure World Cruise mission of Starship Pi. Here is an exchange I had with Archangel Michael during my session with him on February 27. Elias, coming now to forthcoming missions. I believe our first mission is going to be that of disclosure, and I had assumed originally that a small team would be traveling to the Neptune to get photographic, video, interview evidence for distribution to the mass media. But when you mentioned last September that I'd been the commander of the Starship Pi, based on the Neptune and that we were all crew members, I began to get the feeling that perhaps our disclosure mission might be a bit more proactive, and that we might even be bringing Starship Pi to show her around the planet rather like when I worked with the Cunard Line, we used to do an annual world cruise on the ship, the QE2, and it occurred to me a good way to display the ship to the collective would be our own Starship Pi world cruise. AAM, your journey with Cunard was a very apt preparation. You love being on board ships. Elias, you can say that again. AAM, laughing, and it does not matter whether it is traveling the multiverse or the skies, the ocean of the sky or the ocean of Gaia, you adore being on ships. And it is the fluidity, it is the flexibility, it is a sense of adventure. When I say to you, dear heart, you are an adventurer, yes, you are a healer and a physician, and you pretty much always have been, but in that you have always managed to create your sense of adventure. When you were working in Sirius and you were working with the migrations, and often you would heal those who had come through and you would prepare, shall we say, or sometimes heal the animals that were preparing for migration as well, and when we say heal we mean attune them so that their journeys would be healthy. But even in that you created such an adventure. So, is part of disclosure, to answer your question, my beloved friend, is part of disclosure not the grand governmental political disclosure? As we have said, there is not the political will at this time. Will there be a world cruise with the Pi? Oh yes, there will be. 2. Initially, the task of the disclosure team will be to relocate to the Neptune and liaise there with our onboard star brothers and sisters in an education campaign to acquaint the human collective with the presence of the galactics in the solar system and of extraterrestrial life throughout the multiverse. This is likely to be effected through much publicity via the mass media, with documentary programs, interviews etc. in which we from the disclosure team and the crew of Starship Pi will play a prominent part. The fact that we, and many, if not all, of the crew of Starship Pi, have actually been living normal lives on the planet prior to this disclosure voyage is an essential part of demonstrating to the collective that we are all one. That we are not some remote higher dimensional galactic beings, but just as human as everyone else on the planet. We know from our own experience well enough what it means to work hard to make a living, to struggle to put food on the table for our kids, to go through the pain of separation and divorce, to live in poverty, to be homeless. We've been there, done it all. I think of it as giving us street cred with the collective. I envisage this process as taking perhaps a few months, and it is essential in order to introduce, not only the galactics as a whole, but in particular the Starship Pi and her crew. This will ensure that when we bring our Pi down to the planet for her world cruise, Operation Pi in the Sky, we will be eagerly anticipated and welcomed by the collective as the real-life Star Trek beings that we are, and not generating fear by being perceived as malign invading extraterrestrials intent on conquest and causing planetary mayhem as has so often been portrayed in the movies and by the mass media entertainment industry. Indeed, the Star Trek series was a Chanel program based loosely on Starship Pi and her crew for just this purpose, to prepare the collective for our arrival for our world cruise. Here is Ashira of the Neptune explaining this to Susie Maresca in Heavenly Blessings in March 2014. Star Trek holodeck Susie, are there animals on ships? You have gardens, are there physical features like on Earth? Like mountains? Ashira, yes. Well, not mountains. We can't quite manage the mountains. But we do have, what you would experience as holographic. But then again, very often, if we wish to experience mountains, then we would come and visit. But we do have holographic forms of entertainment where we can basically be on the top of a mountain, or at the bottom of the ocean. So dear Susie, you could come and swim with your whales. Susie: oh, yay. So the holodeck in Star Trek was not really far from the truth. Ashira: oh no, that entire program was channeled. It was a forerunner to get people ready to have these concepts. 3. So, once we reach the stage where we can be accepted by the collective, we will be ready to embark on this disclosure world cruise with Starship Pi. We will be bringing the Pi down to Gaia with the intention of taking her around the planet and displaying her over all the major population centers in each continent, thus allowing the maximum number of the collective to see her with their own eyes, although no doubt we will have full mass media coverage every inch of the way. It is my understanding that the last occasion that Starship Pi was seen in the atmosphere of Gaia was shortly before the fall of Atlantis, when I left at that time with my Sacred Union partner to take her back to the Pleiadian sector. My partner had, at that time, been appointed as Atlantean ambassador to the Pleiadian sector in arts and culture. We made our home in the Pleiades, where we had a family of 5 daughters, and we did not return after the fall of Atlantis for a long time. In addition to this global display of our starship, we have plans for some other activities during this world cruise. I have a personal horror of nuclear technology and nuclear warfare dating back to my involvement in the Galactic Wars. Yes, memories do indeed run deep. It is my intention to commence the world cruise of Starship Pi in Japan by placing her over Fukushima and dematerializing, transmuting, this ghastly mess caused by the Cabal, or the recalcitrant ones as our celestial and galactic families encourage us now to refer to them. And from there to take out every nuclear monstrosity, warheads, power stations, nuclear waste dumps, Chernobyl, the whole 9 yards, as we progress around the planet. I discussed this topic with Archangel Michael in February 2015 as follows. Elias, I also get the feeling that we might be using the awesome power of the Pi to assist with Gaia's cleansing. And as you may know, I personally have an abhorrence of nuclear weapons and this sort of thing. I've always felt since my awakening that I would enjoy taking part in removing these, dematerializing them from Gaia. Any comments on that? Yes, and in many ways, most of the unbeknownst to many humans, by the way, but most of the nuclear weapons have been deactivated. They would not work even if they tried. But there is still the question of nuclear waste, and yes, the transmutation. But let us also talk to you about something that you will be doing with your sweet Pi and crew. In the adjustments of Gaia, and you know that she has already ascended, but with the anchoring of many cities of light, and the can we say, slight adjustments of coastlines, one of the things that you will be doing is vacuuming up not only water, but things that could be spilled, such as oil, so that it is held in safety while these slight adjustments take place and then deposited safely elsewhere. Elias, a sort of galactic Hoover. That is it exactly, you will become the Hoover man. Fukushima Elias, I would dearly love to be able to use the power of the Pi to clear up that Fukushima mess. Any chance of that? Yes, that is exactly the type of cleanup we are talking about. Elias, I would dearly love to do that particular job. I once visited the Peace Memorial Park in Hiroshima, and that's left an indelible memory on me. I would love to be able to replace the Fukushima mess with a similar memorial park. For you, for any being who is sensitive, but particularly for you, who has seen the intergalactic wars, and who is Pleiadian through and through, the idea of war of that magnitude, Hiroshima, is so abhorrent that it is beyond measure, and so that is part of it. It reminded you, and does remind you, of the annihilation that took place during the intergalactic wars and the devastation of whole planets and civilizations. And so it is an issue, this nuclear issue, is something that is very near and dear to your heart. 4. In that extract, Archangel Michael mentions slight adjustment of coastlines and a vacuuming up operation. This refers to another major operation that Starship Pi will take part in, and will be covered in another of these articles. The main purpose of the Disclosure World Cruise of our Starship Pi is to finally dispel any doubts that the collective might have about the existence of their galactic family. After all, nobody will be able to dismiss the presence in full and clocked view of a Pleiadian starship 1.1 kilometers, nearly 3/4 of a mile, in size, and pass it off as a weather balloon. Additionally, we will demonstrate that the galactics come in peace and as equals to the collective of this planet. I mentioned earlier that Starship Pi has been provided with a magnificent concert hall during her refit stay in her dry dock on the Neptune. This will be used in connection with a subsidiary, though very important, aspect of her world cruise. Although in this incarnation I do not play any musical instrument, nor read a note of music, I have always had a very deep love of music at soul level, and I know that in fact my higher dimensional self is deeply involved with music both as an instrumental performer and orchestral conductor. I elected not to bring any of these abilities into this present incarnation as it would have been too distracting. As a professional musician one needs to spend many hours per day in practices, and this would have interfered with my primary mission. I also know that Elisa, my twin flame, and my sacred union partner are equally involved in music in the higher dimensions. However, following our dimensional upgrade that my partner and I will need to undergo in order to be able to function in our capacities as crew of a starship, we will have these musical abilities restored. As part of our world cruise, we will also be involved in a global festival of music as part of our bridging mission to integrate the galactics and the human collective. I see this as a joint operation between galactic musicians and those of the terrestrial collective performing together as equals. When I first had the visual download of this onboard concert hall, I thought of it as being on the Neptune. It was before Archangel Michael gave us the details of Starship Pi. I envision this festival of music as being perhaps partly on Gaia and partly on the Neptune. Indeed, even after we were given the details of Starship Pi, I continued to think of musical events being held on the Neptune. However, Archangel Michael put me right on this assumption when Steve asked him about it on my behalf on April 24th of this year. Steve, Elias feels that he and Elisa will be involved in the organization of a festival of music to be held on board the Neptune with the intention of bringing the collective and their star brothers and sisters closer together and involving musicians from the collective and the galactics performing together. Any comments on this? Musikverein Golden Hall in Vienna. Musikverein Golden Hall in Vienna. Archangel Michael, it is highly unlikely that such an occasion will take place on board the Neptune, because the entire purpose is to anchor this energy upon planet, so think of the same plan, dear Elias, only think of it in some of the largest halls in the United States, or England or around the world. 5. It was only then that I realized that the vision I had had of this magnificent concert hall on the ship was actually on our Starship Pi, and that we would have performances both on the ship as well as those in terrestrial concert halls around the world. In a further communication to me on September 30, 2015, actually in connection with another of my projects involving music, Archangel Michael explained how music and sound act as universal healers and unifiers amongst all beings. And you also know within your human self, your intergalactic self, your very soul, that music is a form of healing. And that the unification factor of music, of sound in and amongst all beings, not simply Gaians, but all beings, it is one of the strongest unifiers there is, because the heart opens, it flourishes, it embraces, it blossoms, it accepts, it renews. So yes, dear heart, this project is not only dear to you, but very dear to me as well. 6. I may say that I, and every one of the crew of our beloved Starship Pi, of which we are so proud, are looking forward to Operation Pi in the sky, and we feel a great sense of honor and privilege at having been assigned this momentous mission. Commander, Pleiadian Starship Pi.